Snow fell gently across the wide, silent forest. The trees stood tall and still, their branches heavy with frost. The sky above was gray and thick, hiding the sun completely. Wind whispered through the valley, carrying the sound of the coming storm. Bren, the old trapper, moved slowly through the snow. His thick coat and fur-lined boots kept him warm. He had lived in these woods for many years, alone. He did not mind it. He liked the quiet. He liked the way the snow made everything clean and still. He checked his traps near the frozen stream. A small animal, enough for dinner, was caught in one. He nodded to himself, pulled it free, and reset the trap. His work was almost done for the day. It would be dark soon. As he turned to walk back to his cabin, he stopped. Something was wrong. He heard a sound in the distance. Not a wolf, not the wind. It was a cry, faint, weak, almost like a child. It came from somewhere beyond the trees. Bren listened carefully. The cry came again. It was not human. Curious and cautious, he followed the sound. His steps were slow, careful. The snow was deep, and the wind began to rise. The cry came again, closer this time. He climbed a small hill and looked down. There, in a hollow between the trees, lay something strange. A figure, small and curled up in the snow. It was not wearing proper clothes for the cold. Its skin was pale and almost glowing and long white. Hair spread around its head like silk. Bren moved closer. The figure was a girl. Not human, but not fully alien either. She had 2 arms, 2 legs, a face like his, but her eyes were closed and her lips were blue. Her body shook with cold. Without thinking much, Bren took off his heavy cloak and wrapped it around her. She was too light, almost like air. As he lifted her into his arms, she did not wake. Her skin felt like ice. He hurried back to his cabin, holding her close. The wind blew harder now. Snow whipped through the trees. The storm had begun. Inside the cabin, the fire burned strong. Bren laid the girl on his bed and wrapped more blankets around her. He added wood to the fire until the room was full of warmth. He took off his wet gloves and touched her forehead, cold to cold. He made a pot of warm broth, but she could not drink. Her eyes stayed closed. Her breathing was soft and shallow. He sat beside her, thinking. He had seen many strange things in his life, animals with glowing eyes, lights in the sky, but never something like this. She looked so young, maybe 15 or 16. Her skin was smooth like glass, and her ears were slightly pointed. She was not from here, not from Earth either. He could tell. As the hours passed, the storm outside grew louder, but inside, the cabin stayed warm. The girl slowly began to breathe deeper. Her skin lost its blue color and became soft and pale again. Near midnight, she opened her eyes. They were bright silver, like moonlight on water. She looked around, scared, confused. Her hands grabbed the blanket tightly. She saw Bren and backed away to the corner of the bed. Bren raised his hand slowly. "It's all right," he said in a calm voice. "You're safe here." She didn't understand. Her eyes stayed wide. Her lips moved, but no words came. He pointed to himself. "Bren," he said. She looked at him but said nothing. He pointed to her. "You?" She didn't answer. After a moment, she whispered something soft. The word didn't make sense to him. It was not any language he knew. "That's okay," he said gently. "You can rest. No one's going to hurt you." She stared at him for a long time, then slowly lowered her head back to the pillow. Her body was still shaking, but not as much. The firelight danced across the room. Bren pulled up a chair and sat nearby. He kept the fire going and checked her breathing often. Every time he moved away from the bed, she opened her eyes and looked at him. When he stepped toward the door to check the wind, she gave a small cry, not loud, but filled with fear. "All right," he said, returning to the chair. "I'll stay right here." She relaxed again. He did not sleep that night. His eyes stayed on her. This strange girl who had fallen from the sky, nearly frozen in the snow. Who was she? Where had she come from? What had happened to her ship? Or her people? Questions filled his mind, but there were no answers. Only the sound of the fire In the soft wind outside, by morning, the storm had passed. The snow lay deep and smooth across the forest. Sunlight broke through the clouds at last. Inside the cabin, the girl was still asleep, breathing steady. Bren made some tea and sat by the window, watching the light grow. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't know why this girl had come. But one thing was clear. She was here now, and she needed him. The next morning was quiet. The sky was clear and blue. Snow covered the trees like white blankets. Birds had not yet returned after the storm. Everything looked still. But something had changed inside the cabin. The girl was awake. Bren stood near the fire, holding a cup of hot tea. He looked toward the bed. The strange girl with silver eyes was sitting up now. Her back was against the wall. Blankets covered her, and her eyes followed every move Bren made. She still looked scared. Bren gave her space. He didn't walk too close. Instead, he pointed to the tea and then to her. He said kindly, "Warm. Good for you." She did not answer. She didn't take the cup either. She just stared at him with wide eyes. Her hands gripped the edge of the blanket like she might run at any second. He set the cup on the small table beside her bed and backed away. Then he sat in the chair near the fire. He didn't look at her for a while. He just watched the flames. The silence between them was long. Later, he stood and walked to the cupboard. He opened a tin of dried fruit and some old bread. He placed a small plate near her. This time, not speaking, the girl looked at the food. Her eyes were hungry. She waited until Bren went back to his chair before she slowly reached out and took a piece of fruit. She smelled it first, then tasted it, then ate it fast like she hadn't eaten in days. Bren gave a small nod. "Good," he said. She looked at him and then looked away. For the rest of the day, Bren didn't ask her anything. He didn't try to speak too much. He just did what he always did: cut wood, fed the fire, cleaned tools. Sometimes he looked at her. Sometimes she looked at him. But the space between them stayed quiet. At night, when the wind picked up again, she pulled the blankets tighter. Her shoulders shook. Bren got up and placed another log on the fire. He looked at her with soft eyes and pointed to the fire. "Warmth," he said. "Safe here." She still didn't speak. But she didn't cry either. Slowly, she lay back down, keeping her eyes on him until they finally closed. Bren stayed in his chair. He could tell she didn't want him to leave. Every time he moved toward the door or stood up, her body tensed. Her hands gripped the blanket again. It was clear. She was afraid of being alone. So he stayed nearby. Days passed like this. She got stronger little by little. Her color returned. Her eyes became less afraid. She still didn't speak much, but sometimes she would repeat simple words that Bren said. When he said, "food," she would whisper the word back. When he said, "fire," she touched her chest and said it again. She started moving around the cabin, carefully, slowly. She looked at the tools, the books, the pictures on the wall. She seemed curious, like a child learning everything for the first time. Bren watched her quietly. One evening, he found her standing at the window, staring out at the snow. Her silver eyes were wide. Her hands pressed gently against the glass. She said one word in a soft voice, a word he didn't understand. He walked over and stood beside her. "You're home?" he asked. She didn't answer. But her eyes looked far away, beyond the forest, beyond the mountains, like she was thinking of another place, a far-off world. He asked again, slower, "Where are you from?" She turned and looked at him. Then she touched her own chest and said, "Luma." Bren blinked. "Luma." He repeated. She gave a small nod. It was the first time she shared something about herself. A name. It was something. Bren smiled. "Luma." He said again, gently, "That's your name." She watched him say it, then gave the smallest smile. After that, she became a little less quiet. She began to point at things and say their names. Sometimes she tried to say new words but got them wrong. Bren didn't mind. He helped her, corrected her kindly. He never laughed at her. One night, a strong wind howled outside. The cabin walls creaked. Snow blew against the windows. Luma sat near the fire. Her knees pulled close to her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the door. Bren moved his chair closer to her side. "You're safe here," he said. "No one can get you." She looked at him, then reached out and touched his sleeve. Just for a second, then pulled her hand back. Bren didn't speak. He just nodded. That night, when it was time to sleep, Luma didn't want to be alone. She stayed on the bed. But every time Bren walked toward the other room, she sat up. She didn't speak, but her eyes asked him to stay. So he moved his chair beside her bed again. She relaxed. Her eyes closed. Her breathing slowed. And again, he kept watch by the firelight. A week had passed since Bren found the strange girl in the snow. Her name was Luma. She was stronger now. Her face had color again. She ate more, moved more, and even smiled sometimes. But still, she didn't speak much, only short words, only. When she had to, Bren did not press her with questions. He waited. He knew she would speak when she was ready. One morning, the sky was clear and blue. A soft wind moved through the forest. Birds were singing again. It was the first good day after the long storm. Bren put on his coat and boots. He looked at Luma and said, "I'm going to check the traps." Luma looked up from the fire. Her face showed worry. He gave a small smile. "Just down the ridge." "Not far." She stood up. "I come." Bren paused. He was surprised to hear her speak clearly. She stepped closer and pulled on the thick coat he had given her. He nodded. "All right, but stay close." They walked through the snow together. Luma moved slowly at first, but she did not fall. Her boots sank into the snow, and she held Bren's arm as they climbed the hill. Her eyes kept scanning the sky, always watching. They reached the ridge where a few traps had been set. A rabbit had been caught. Bren cleaned it quickly and reset the trap. Then Luma stopped walking. She was staring at something. Bren followed her gaze. Far ahead, where the trees were broken and burned, the snow had melted in a wide circle. The ground was black and charred. Pieces of metal and glowing wires stuck out of the earth. Luma walked toward the crash site. Her steps were fast now. Bren followed, careful but curious. The wreckage was part of a small ship. It looked smooth and silver, but twisted like it had fallen from the sky. Parts were cracked open. A long wing was buried deep in the snow. The air smelled like smoke and strange oil. Luma stepped close to the open side of the ship. She placed her hand on the smooth metal and closed her eyes. For a moment, she didn't move. Bren stood nearby. "This is yours." She nodded slowly. "Scout ship, small. Not weapon." "Others with you?" Luma opened her eyes. "No, alone." She stepped inside the broken ship. Bren followed carefully. Inside. It was cold and dark. Lights flickered on one side. Broken screens, wires, and a strange floating orb lay on the floor. Bren didn't know what anything did, but Luma moved like she did. She picked up the orb and placed her hand on it. It lit up, showing a shape in the air. A map. It showed stars and lines and symbols. Then it blinked red. Luma spoke softly, mostly to herself. "Beacon broken." Bren looked at her. "You were calling someone." She nodded. "My people. They run from danger." Bren's eyes narrowed. "What danger?" She looked at him for a long time before answering. "Hunters. Not alive. Not machine. Both." He didn't understand the full meaning, but her face was serious. Her voice was low. "They take planets," she said. "No talk. No warning." She pointed at the beacon. "I sent call. But too late." Ship crashed. Bren looked at the damaged parts around them. The metal was burned in places. Something had hit her before she landed. "You were being chased," he said. She nodded. He stepped out of the ship and looked around the area. Snow had melted from the crash heat, but now it was freezing again. In the distance, trees were broken in strange ways, like something heavy had moved through them. He picked up a piece of metal from the ground. It was shaped like part of a wing, but had a strange symbol on it. A symbol different from what was inside Luma's ship. Sharp lines, dark color. He showed it to her. "This yours?" Luma shook her head. Her eyes widened. "No, that is theirs." Bren frowned. "The hunters." She took the metal and crushed it with her hands. Her fingers glowed for a second. Then the piece turned to dust. They find signals, follow, destroy, always chasing. Bren looked at the sky. It was still blue, still calm. But now he felt something different. A warning in the wind. He turned back to Luma. Can they find you here? She nodded. Maybe. If beacon sent wrong signal. Bren looked back at the broken ship. Then we fix it or destroy it. Luma nodded again. We take what we can. Hide the rest. They worked together. Luma pulled out a few glowing parts from the wreck. A long rod, a silver cube, and something that looked like a small energy cell. Bren helped her carry them. They walked back to the cabin with the parts. The sky stayed clear. But both of them looked back more than once. Inside the cabin, Bren placed the parts on the table. Luma studied each one with care. She spoke softly while working. This helps shield signal. This gives power. This one broken. Bren leaned against the wall. Can we fix it? She shook her head. Not now. But maybe. That night, Luma sat near the fire, holding the silver cube close. Bren sharpened his knife in silence. At one point. She looked at him. You helped me, she said. He looked at her with calm eyes. I couldn't leave you in the snow. You could, she said. But you didn't. Bren gave a slow nod. People don't leave others behind. Not if they're good. Luma smiled, a small one. But it stayed longer this time. She looked round the cabin, then back at him. I stay, she said softly, here, with you. Bren didn't answer right away. He looked into the fire, then nodded once. Then we make this place ready, just in case someone comes looking, outside. The stars came out over the snowy trees, and far above, something watched. The stars were quiet, but Sella's mind was not. She sat alone by the window in the human diplomat quarters. The glass showed her the lights of the Varn capital, floating towers shining over the dark city. It was beautiful from a distance, but she knew the truth behind those lights. She had lived under them. Ian entered the room, holding two cups. One held tea. The other had warm water with a touch of sweet leaf, something Sella had come to enjoy. I brought this for you, Ren said. Sella nodded and took the cup. Thank you. She sipped slowly. Her hands were calm, but her eyes were far away, Ren noticed. You've been quiet today. I'm remembering, she said. Ian sat across from her. Can I ask, what are you remembering? Sella looked down into the cup. Before I was a gift, before I was a thing. I remember a small house, a garden. My mother had blue skin like mine, but her eyes were darker. She used to sing while planting. She paused, searching for more. My father worked with machines. He let me play with parts when I was young. I broke more than I fixed, but he always smiled. Ren listened without speaking. Sella continued. Then one day, soldiers came. They said the Carry were to be honored with service, that we would bring pride to our people. My parents were silent. They knew what it meant. Her voice grew lower. I was taken, trained, moved from one house to another. Each place had new rules, new clothes, new names. She looked up at Ren, but no one ever asked what I remembered. You are the first. Ren leaned forward. I want to know you, not what they made you, but who you are. Sella smiled faintly. I don't know who I am yet, but I think I'm starting to remember. That afternoon, Ren showed Sella something new. He pulled a device from a shelf. It was small and flat, with a glass screen. When he pressed a button, it came to life. Images danced across it, earth landscapes, music, voices. Children laughing, people walking in rain. Sella watched in silence. Her fingers slowly reached out to touch the screen. The rain falling on the faces made her blink. This place, she said softly, feels free. It is, Ren said. It's not perfect, but people there can choose their lives. Sella turned to him. Can someone like me go there? Ren hesitated for a second, then spoke clearly. Yes, but you wouldn't be Carrie there. You would just be Sella. Sella whispered, just me. They sat together for a while, the sound of soft earth music playing in the background. Sella didn't speak again, but she didn't have to. Ren could see the change in her eyes. That evening, something unexpected happened. A message arrived from the Varn Council, a formal invitation. Ren had been requested to attend a private gathering hosted by the elder nobles. It was a rare honor. Refusing would be seen as disrespect. He told Sela about the event. "They want me to come alone," he said. "But I don't trust it. I will wait here." Sela said no. Ren said firmly, "I want you to stay with the other human staff. You'll be safer." Sela hesitated. "You think they will harm you?" "I don't know," Ren replied. "But I don't want to risk leaving you unguarded." She nodded. "I understand." Before leaving, Ren handed her a small device. "This button sends a message to my signal if something happens. Use it." Sela held it tightly. "Be careful." Ren gave her one last look, then left through the door. Hours passed. Sela sat with the human staff in a lower chamber. They were polite to her, but she could still feel the distance. She was not quite human, not quite alien, not yet one of them. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed through the halls. An alarm, then a second one. The humans around her stood up quickly, trying to contact their teams. Sela's heart raced. She pressed the button Ren had given her. No response. The walls shook slightly. A guard rushed in. There was a fire near the council chamber. Something went wrong during the meeting. Sela stood quickly. "Where's Ren?" "We don't know." The guard said, "Security is trying to reach the area." Sela didn't wait. She ran past the humans, through the halls, up the stairs, toward the smoke. No one stopped her. The council chamber was in chaos. Parts of the ceiling had collapsed. Smoke filled the air. Lights blinked in red. Sela coughed as she stepped through the broken entrance. Then she saw him. Ryan was on the floor, trying to move a heavy beam off a fallen guard. His face was covered in ash, but he was alive. Sela rushed forward and helped lift the beam. Together, they freed the guard and pulled him to safety. Ren looked at her. "I told you to stay back, and I told you I'm not a thing to keep in a box," she replied. Ren smiled weakly. "Fair." Sela helped him stand. "What happened?" "I asked the council why the carry were still being given as gifts. Someone didn't like the question. Someone started the fire." Ren nodded. "It was no accident." Sela looked at the burning chamber. "Then we must ask louder." That night, back in their quarters, Sela stood at the window again. The city still glowed, but it looked different now. The fire had shaken the palace. Rumors had already begun. She turned to Ren. "I want to speak." "About what?" "About what happened." "About me. About the carry. I want to tell my story." Ren nodded. "I'll stand beside you." Sela looked out at the towers again. "Not as a gift, not as a servant, but as someone who remembers." Her voice was strong now, the voice of someone who had once been silent, and now the whole empire would hear her. The hall was silent. 100 eyes were fixed on the center stage. Long golden curtains hung on the walls. Soft light fell on polished floors. This was the Hall of Voices, a place where only the highest members of the Varn Empire could speak. But today, someone unexpected stood before them. Sela. Not a noble, not a warrior, not a ruler, just a woman who had once been given as a gift. Ren stood behind her, silent but proud. Sela stepped forward. Her hands were steady, her breath calm. She looked around the hall. Some faces showed surprise, others discomfort, but none looked away. She began. "I was raised to be silent," she said, "taught to lower my head, taught to obey. I did not choose my life. It was chosen for me." Her voice was soft, but clear. "I am a carry. My people have been used as symbols of loyalty, given as gifts, not friends, treated with care, but without choice. This was called honor. But I do not feel honored when I am treated like a thing." She paused and looked straight at the high noble seated at the front. "I was given to Ambassador Ren as a sign of peace, but he did not treat me like a gift. He gave me something greater than safety. He gave me the chance to choose." Now whispers moved through the room. A few nobles exchanged glances. "I stand here not to accuse," Sela continued. "I stand to ask one question. If your own people were given away like packages, would you still call it peace?" No one answered. She stepped back. Her words were done, but the silence was louder than ever before. Ren walked beside her as she left the stage. Later that evening, In the guest quarters, Scylla sat near the window. The stars were bright. Her hands were in her lap. She had spoken her truth. But she didn't know what would come next. Ian entered the room with a small smile. "They're still talking about it," he said. "Some of them are angry. Some are quiet. But none of them laughed." Scylla looked up. "Did I do wrong?" "No," Ren said. "You lit a fire." She nodded slowly. "It feels strange, speaking. I thought I would be afraid. But I wasn't. That's because the truth gives strength." Scylla stood and walked to a small table. She picked up a piece of paper. It held a message written by another Carrie who worked inside the palace. "She heard me," Scylla said, "and now she wants to learn how to read." Ren took the paper and read the note. "This is the beginning." The next few days changed everything. Carrie workers across the palace began to whisper. Some started asking questions. A few asked for teaching. Others for paper and books. One even refused to bow during a noble's visit. Scylla met with them quietly. She spoke in small rooms and hidden corners. Ren helped where he could. But Scylla was the one they listened to. She taught them the letters Ren had once shown her. A for air, B for book, C for choice. Each letter felt like a step towards something bigger. But not everyone welcomed the change. One night, while returning from a lesson, Scylla and Ren were stopped in a narrow hallway. A tall Varn noble blocked their path. His robe was dark red, with silver markings on the sleeves. "You speak too much," he said to Scylla. Scylla stood still. "I speak the truth." "Your truth is dangerous," the noble said. "The Carrie are calm because they are silent. You bring fire where we build peace." Ren stepped forward. "Peace is not made by silence. It is made by respect." The noble narrowed his eyes. "You're only a visitor here, human. Be careful what you stir." He turned and walked away, but his words stayed behind like smoke. That night, Scylla could not sleep. She sat near the fire, staring into the quiet flame. Ren joined her, holding two cups of warm drink. "They will not stop this easily," he said. "I know," Scylla replied, "but I don't want to hide anymore." Ren took a sip and looked into the fire. "Then we need to find others, not just Carrie, other species, other voices. The Varn listen only when many speak," Scylla nodded. "There are others like us. Then we will find them." The next morning, Scylla made a decision. She dressed not in the soft robes given to her by the palace, but in simple clothing, clean and plain. She tied her hair back. She wore no jewels. She walked into the city square where workers and travelers moved in all directions. She climbed onto a low stone wall and raised her voice. "I am not a noble," she said. "I am not a leader. I am not better than anyone here. But I have learned something." People turned to listen. A few stopped walking. Some laughed. Others waited. "I was given like an object," she said. "But now I choose to stand as a person." The crowd grew. If you have ever felt unseen, unheard, or unwanted, know this: you matter. You can choose, and together, we are not small. A cheer rose, not loud, but real. That was the spark. And from that moment, it began to spread. By the evening, people were speaking her name. Not Scylla the gift, but Scylla the voice. And the fire that had once warmed only her heart was now lighting others. The city of the Varn Empire had never been so loud. Not with noise, but with voices. Whispered talks, secret meetings, quiet lessons in dark rooms. People were listening now. Not just the Carrie, but others too. Workers, traders, even a few guards. They all spoke about the same thing. Scylla the voice. Scylla the free Carrie. She was no longer a hidden servant. She walked openly through the streets. People greeted her, asked questions, thanked her. Some asked her to teach their daughters to read. Others asked her to help them speak to humans like Ren. The fire she had started was now burning across the city. But fire brings light and also danger. One morning, Ren received a message. It was a sealed scroll from the Varn High Council. He opened it and read the words carefully. Then he gave it to Scylla. Her eyes moved over the lines. The council requests your voice in debate. One voice against theirs. 1 hour. One answer. Scylla looked up. They want me to speak again. They want to stop the fire, Ren said. This is not a gift. This is a trap. She folded the scroll. Then I will not walk into it. I will run into it, Ren nodded with a small smile. Then we prepare. For 2 days, Sela met with people from all corners of the city. She spoke with old scholars, young workers, and even a retired Varn soldier. She listened more than she spoke. She did not want power. She wanted truth. When the day of the debate came, the Hall of Voices was filled again. But this time, the air was different. A quiet tension floated over the crowd. The council sat on their high seats. They wore gold and black robes, their faces calm but firm. Sela stood below, dressed in plain gray. Ren stood behind her, arms crossed. The first counselor stood. You may speak, he said. Sela stepped forward. You asked me here to speak, not for myself, but for the carry, and for others like us. I accept. She took a breath. You call our silence peace. But peace without choice is not peace. It is quiet fear. You call our work service. But service without freedom is not honor. It is control. One of the counselors raised a hand. The carry were raised with care. Given purpose, given value. Sela replied, we were given chains. Even if those chains were soft, even if they were painted gold. Another counselor stood. Do you want war? Division? Chaos? Sela's voice remained calm. No, I want something simple. I want children born free. I want the right to speak, to learn, to walk the city not as a servant, but as a citizen. That is not chaos. That is justice. The crowd stirred. Another voice rose from the seats behind the council. It was Elder Surat, one of the oldest nobles. You are brave, Sela. But do you truly think the old ways can change? Sela looked at her directly. They already have. You just haven't seen it. After the debate, the crowd poured out into the streets. The wind was cool. The sky was clear. People talked in small groups. They repeated her words. Some disagreed. Some nodded. Some just stood and thought. That night, Ren and Sela sat on the balcony of their quarters. The city lights flickered below. They didn't shout at you, Ren said. No, Sela replied. They listened. Ren smiled. That's more than we expected. Sela turned to him. Something is happening. I can feel it. You're right, he said. But the real test is still ahead. The next week brought something new. A group of young Varn scholars released a letter. In it, they said the carry deserved freedom, that the empire needed to grow, that silence was no longer strength. Then a group of carry workers refused to work without being paid. Then a group of human traders began offering books and tools to carry schools. The change was growing. And then came the message that shook the palace. The Eastern Carry Quarter had held a vote. A local council had been formed by Carry for Carry. They had named it the Assembly of the Free. It was peaceful, organized, simple, but powerful. For the first time in history, the Carry were leading themselves. The High Council was silent for days. Then they sent another message. They wanted Sela to visit. Alone. Ryan shook his head. I don't like this. I have to go, Sela said. They could try to silence you. Then let them try. She entered the high chamber where only a few were present. The first counselor stood. Elder Surat was beside him. We did not expect this, the first counselor said. Your voice was loud. Too loud. I only spoke the truth, Sela replied. We have watched the assembly. Elder Surat said, it has not caused harm. No riots, no violence, because it is built on peace, Sela said. The peace of freedom. There was a pause. Then the first counselor said, we cannot stop the change, but we can choose how we respond. He looked at her carefully. We will recognize the assembly as a pilot group, one sector only. Under review. Sela nodded slowly. It is a start. He added, you will not be punished, but you will be watched. I already was, she said with calm eyes. It didn't stop me. Sela left the chamber and walked back into the bright afternoon light. A group of carry workers stood nearby. One of them stepped forward. Well, he asked. Sela smiled. They didn't stop us. Cheers followed, quiet, but full of heart. That night, as Rin watched the stars, he said, "You didn't raise an army, no." Sela said, "I raised a voice." And that voice was now part of a growing song, a song of choice, of courage, of change. The war was not of weapons, it was of words, and Sela was winning. It had been 3 months since Sela first spoke in the Hall of Voices. Much had changed in that short time. The Assembly of the Free was now recognized into more sectors. Carrie citizens had begun to take part in local city work, trade groups, and even small cultural events. They were not just seen as workers anymore. They were being seen as people. But change was slow, and some still held to the old ways. Sela knew this. Every day brought new letters to her desk. Some were kind, some were cruel. But she read them all. Each voice mattered, even those that still feared what she stood for. One morning, Sela stood beside Rin on a tall platform. Below them was the Carrie Garden, once a hidden place behind palace walls, now open to all. A school had been built at its edge. It had no walls, just benches, books, and light. Dozens of young Carries sat in front of her, their eyes full of wonder. Some wore their work robes, some wore simple clothes, but all were equal here. Sela spoke with a calm voice. "When I was young, I thought my life was already written. I thought I had only one path, but paths can change. You can step off them. You can make new ones." She looked at the sky. The sun was warm. Reading is not just for learning. It is for dreaming. And dreams are the first seeds of change. She stepped down and handed a book to a small girl. The girl hugged it tightly. Rin smiled. "You've become a teacher." "I was always learning," Sela said. "Now I pass it on." Later that week, a message arrived from Earth Council. Rin read it with quiet care. Then he gave it to Sela. She read each word. Then she looked up, surprised. "They want me to speak on Earth." "Yes," Rin said. "At the Assembly of Allied Species, you're no longer just a voice of the Carrie. They see you as something bigger." Sela sat down slowly. "I don't know if I can." "You already have," Rin replied, "many times. This time, the room will just be larger." She smiled. "Will you come with me, always?" The journey to Earth was long but peaceful. Sela watched the stars through the ship window. She had never left the Varn system before. Now she was crossing the stars, not as a gift, but as a guest. When they landed, crowds waited, cameras, reporters, officials. But Sela kept her steps steady. She walked with calm. Beside her, Rin gave a small nod of encouragement. Inside the assembly hall, leaders from over 50 species sat in wide rows. Tall ones, short ones, winged ones, scaled ones. All different, all listening. Sela stood at the center. "I was once given away," she began. "Not as a person, but as a prize. My voice was not asked. My wishes were not known." She looked at the audience. "But I was lucky. I met someone who treated me not as a gift, but as a guest. He reminded me I could choose." She shared the story of her first day, of learning letters, of asking questions, of speaking truth to power. "I'm not here to blame. I'm here to show that even old systems can grow, that kindness matters, that respect is stronger than force." She ended with soft words. "Peace is not the absence of noise. Peace is the presence of choice." The hall was silent. Then came the sound of hands, wings, and claws clapping, a wave of quiet support. After the speech, Sela walked through the gardens of the Earth Embassy. Flowers from many planets grew there, each different, all thriving together. I enjoined her. "You spoke well." She smiled. "I didn't shake this time. You've grown." She looked around. "So have we." When they returned to the Varn Empire, they found more change waiting. The High Council had agreed to create a new school system, one where Carrie and other servant races could study freely. A new law was being written to protect choice. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And in the Carrie quarters, a wall had been painted with a single phrase, "We choose now, Sela." Touch the words. Not long ago, she had been afraid to speak. Now her words were written in paint, in books, and in memory. That evening, she and Rin sat by the fire. He handed her a letter. This came from the Emperor. She opened it. Inside were only a few lines. You changed more than policy. You changed us. She folded the letter and placed it near the flame. Ren looked at her. What will you do next? She thought for a while. Build a bigger school. Maybe write a book. Maybe help others speak. The fire should not stop with me. Ren nodded. Then I'll be beside you. As the stars rose, Scylla looked up at the night sky. She remembered the question she had once asked. Why haven't you touched me yet? Back then, she had asked it in confusion, in sadness, in fear. Now she understood the answer, because real touch is not of hands. It is of respect, of freedom, of words, and in that way, Ren had touched her heart first. She had been a gift once. Now, she was a giver of hope, and the world was no longer silent.